Hey, how's it going, guys? Shaggy from the Order of Mithril here. And today we're going to do a random review of Bloodstained, Curse of the Moon. And if you are an old school Nintendo player, like I was when I was growing up, this is going to hit some marks for you. But let's go ahead and get into it here. So as I had mentioned in my random review of Bloodstained, whenever it was on Kickstarter, they weren't asking for very much, but ended up getting $5.5 million donated to them for the creation of Bloodstained. Well, Bloodstained Curse of the Moon just happens to be one of the goals that they were aiming for and provided with that $5.5 million. I gotta say that this is the kind of goals that you want to see achieved from a Kickstarter program like that. While Artblade developed Bloodstained and released it in 2019, Inti Creates actually did this one and released it in 2018. It is the classic platformer style game that you would have seen be very popular on the NES, the original Nintendo back in the 80s. And the entirety of this whole game is a great homage to the early Castlevania titles that came out on that system. One other little bit of trivia about this game that I found extremely fascinating, and it may not be that impressive by today's standards with the type of games that come out, but this game was actually developed within 6 months. It was then shown off at a Japanese indie game festival and then released 2 weeks later. But 6 months to make a game? Pretty impressive to me. How about we go ahead and get this review started though. So the first thing I'm going to take a look at is the graphics, the art. Everything about this game is just amazing to me. It hits that old niche for me, like I am playing a game from back in the day, a retro game. They came in with this 8-bit art style, and the music that was done for it was just superb to me. I feel like I got a bit of nostalgia, like I was actually playing a Castlevania game that had gone unreleased for decades when playing through this, and I thoroughly enjoyed that look, that feel that it gave me from playing through it. I mean, every bit of it screams Castlevania 1, 2, and 3 that were out on the Nintendo. And I think that if you are an old school fan of Castlevania or an old NES fan, that this game is going to catch your attention. With that old school vibe in mind, let's go ahead and take a look at the gameplay for this. Now, it is a classic style platformer with that horror motif over it where you're battling against zombies and bats and creatures of the night in various forms, but I feel like it captured that old essence of what it was like to play an old platformer. From beginning to end, you have multiple paths that you can go through, which may deviate a little bit from the way games were developed back then based on which characters that you have unlocked at the time, but I still feel like I'm playing Castlevania 3 Dracula's Curse when playing through this. I mean, the first starting character that you're going to get is named Zangetsu, and he uses a sword, but the next character that you're going to unlock is Miriam, and she actually happens to be the main protagonist of the full Bloodstained game. But in this, she is an ancillary character, secondary, but she uses a whip, which is very reminiscent of the old games with Belmonts in them. But I enjoyed like the way the enemies would come at you in the predictable patterns. After you learned them, they were predictable. The bosses are a little bit more unpredictable than the basic enemies that just throw themselves at you. I enjoyed the fact that there's lamps everywhere that you have to break for sub-weapon power and money items to give you extra points or hearts to give you health back. I like that Zangetsu and Miriam and the other characters actually had special abilities that weren't locked into the classic Castlevania sub-weapon types, but still using that sub-weapon type vibe. Like, they still felt like whenever you picked up a dagger or an axe, like they're good for different things. So I enjoyed every bit of the way each character felt individually and how the game felt as a whole through the gameplay that you actually experienced through the title. I've already touched on this slightly, but I'm going to look at the audio for this now, and the thing about the audio was that it matched the graphics perfectly. Like, you have that old chiptune style vibe coming from the music, but it doesn't feel like it's completely devoid of the theme and the motif that's supplied in the game. So I enjoyed the music every little bit. and even just like the little chiptune sound effects that came whenever you're slashing with Zangetsu's sword, or you're casting one of Miriam's sub-weapons, or one of the magics from one of the other two characters that are unlockable. Every little bit of it just sounded great. Even coming down to looking at the way the bosses sound. They're very thematic in and of themselves, so whenever you get the actual sound effects that are going on in that boss battle, they sound really great as well. It doesn't sound like having an 8-bit chiptune style soundtrack really hindered this game. It only elevated it even further. It seemed like a lot of care was put into the audio of this game. When it comes to the difficulty of this title, you're going to notice that it is a retro game, so it brings back some of those retro difficulty settings. And I don't mean like going between normal, easy, hard, and super hard, but there are those settings in there, but it's more akin to like it's going to play like a retro title. So sometimes the controls will feel a little bit stiff, but I feel like that immerses me further, because whenever it comes down to, say, jumping over a hole, if you're jumping from the wrong spot, you're gonna die. The boss battles are patterned like every other title that was out at this time, whenever the retro games were out, I should say. And you're going to lose a couple of times to some of the harder ones, but it's not going to be overbearing. So I feel like they've done a really good job with the difficulty. I don't feel like it jumps and spikes and dips and dives a whole lot. I feel like it's still very consistent, even considering the type of game it is. So I enjoyed the difficulty for this one. As every game should, it should have some level of replayability. And I feel like this one delivers, but in its own unique way. Because it is based on the retro style of gaming that was present on the original Nintendo Entertainment System, I feel like the replayability is a little different. It should be something because you want to beat the game faster, or maybe you did something a little wonky through your last playthrough and you want to go back and try and correct it and see if you can do better this time. So I feel like it's there. I don't feel like it's the same kind of replayability if you're going to play a game, say like Fable, where there's multiple life paths that you're going to be able to play through and you want to just get a different experience. This is a game about challenging yourself to get through it better or faster or both. So in my opinion for this title, I feel it ticks all the boxes that it should to be a retro style game just done in the modern age. So I would say that it is a must play. I would definitely say it's a must play if you're an NES fan or a Castlevania fan. I feel like this feels a lot of that nostalgia that you would have about that system and those titles that came out in that era. So again, my opinion, but I think it's worth it. And I'm going to give a quick shout out to a guy here on YouTube that I met on Instagram that goes by thecube 360. He is a die-hard Battletoads fan, but even more than just being a Battletoads fan, he's a classic game fan. And he was the one that, brought up to my attention that I should probably do a video about this title. So thanks for the recommendation on that, Cube, and I hope you're having a good one out there. But with that, I'm going to bring this video to an end. I appreciate you guys stopping by the channel. If you would, go ahead and jump down into the comment section below and let me know what you would like to see done on this channel. But thanks guys, hope you're having a good one.